Not only have you lied about both, you've intentionally done the exact opposite. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting journalists than you are prosecuting pedophiles and creeps. In fact, your boss, the President of the United States, stated that this administration, quote, took the freedom of speech away. And at your direction, DOJ has arrested Don Lemon and Georgia Fort. And I might add that y'all actually had a judge that rejected y'all for trying to arrest Don Lemon before, just like the grand jury rejected y'all as it relates to Senator Kelly.
Tonight, we examine a Department of Justice that has been turned into a tool of personal protection. We see an Attorney General nominee who claims to be ending the weaponization of the law while simultaneously using that law to arrest journalists and shield the powerful. In the halls of Congress, the mask of composed defiance has met the hard reality of forensic evidence. We are watching a reckoning over the redacted files of a convicted predator and the names hidden within them. The question is no longer just about what was done. The question is about who is being protected by the very institution sworn to uphold justice. We go inside the testimony and the documents to show you exactly how the rule of law is being dismantled in real time. Let's play this clip.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And to be clear, I'm not going to ask any questions of this witness because this witness has revealed that she has no intentions of answering questions. But instead, I'm going to ask some very basic questions really quickly of my colleague, Becca Ballant, if she will answer right or wrong, raping children.
Wrong.
Right or wrong, killing random citizens.
Definitely wrong.
Right or wrong, enriching yourself as the sitting president of the United States.
Definitely wrong.
Okay, thank you, because I probably never would have got that with our witness. Our witness who somehow is a lawyer but does not understand how it works with witnesses. I'm not really sure what law school she went to and what all kind of cases she tried, but typically when you come into a space and somebody's a witness, then they sit there and they answer questions instead of asking questions.
Attorney General Pam Bondi has stood before the American people and the United States Congress to claim that she is restoring the integrity of the Department of Justice. She has claimed that her leadership is defined by an end to the political use of law enforcement. This is a lie. The evidence from the department's own actions and the testimony provided under oath reveals a coordinated effort to do the exact opposite. While claiming to end weaponization, this administration is actively weaponizing the Department of Justice against its critics, against journalists, and against the transparency required by the American people. This is not a matter of political opinion. This is a matter of documented record. When an attorney general uses the power of the federal government to shield a president from his own history while threatening citizens with unprecedented legal consequences, the institution of justice has ceased to function as intended. Let's play this clip.
In the written testimony of this witness, of this particular witness, she stated that when she took office, she had two main goals. The first was to end the weaponization of justice, and second, to return the department to its core mission. Not only have you lied about both, you've intentionally done the exact opposite. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting journalists than you are prosecuting pedophiles and creeps. In fact, your boss, the President of the United States, stated that this administration, quote, took the freedom of speech away. And at your direction, DOJ has arrested Don Lemon and Georgia Fort.
The specific lie was delivered by Pam Bondi during her sworn testimony before the House Judiciary Committee. In her written and oral statements, Bondi defined the two main goals of her tenure. She stated that her first goal was to end the weaponization of justice. Her second goal was to return the Department of Justice to its core mission. These are the exact claims she used to justify her leadership of the nation's top law enforcement agency. She presented herself as a guardian of the law who would remove partisan influence from federal investigations. This claim is contradicted by her own history as Donald Trump's personal lawyer and her current actions as the head of the department. She has not ended weaponization. She has redirected it. She has not returned the department to its core mission. She has turned the department into a shield for the executive branch and a sword against the press. Let's play this clip.
And I might add that y'all actually had a judge that rejected y'all for trying to arrest Don Lemon before, just like the grand jury rejected y'all as it relates to Senator Kelly, just like a grand jury rejected y'all as it relates to Senator Slotkin, just like the case against Tish James was dismissed and the case against Mr. Comey was dismissed. I completely don't get how it is that you're sitting at the top of DOJ because you don't seem to be good at your job. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting these journalists. In fact, We know after Georgia Fort and Don Lemon were arrested, we know that there were homes of journalists that were raided.
The forensic evidence of this lie is found in the department's own case files and the records of the House Judiciary Committee. Representative Jasmine Crockett presented evidence that under Bondi's direction, the Department of Justice is spending more taxpayer resources arresting journalists than it is prosecuting individuals tied to high criminal networks. The evidence shows that the DOJ has arrested journalists Don Lemon and Georgia Fort. This is a direct use of law enforcement power to suppress the First Amendment. In the case of Don Lemon, the evidence shows that the government's attempt to arrest him was so legally deficient that it was rejected by a judge. The evidence further shows that a grand jury rejected the department's attempts to target Senator Kelly and Senator Slacken. Cases against Tish James and James Comey were dismissed by the courts. These are not the actions of a department returning to its core mission. These are the actions of a department engaged in a pattern of failed politically motivated prosecutions. Further evidence of weaponization is found in the department's handling of the Epstein files. Representative Crockett revealed that there are at least 5,000 files containing over 38,000 references to Donald Trump, his wife, or Mar-a-Lago. Despite this volume of references, the department under Bondi has maintained heavy redactions that obscure potential links to powerful figures. A whistleblower report suggests that DOJ officials were explicitly instructed to minimize mentions of Donald Trump in public releases. While Bondi claims to be aggressively pursuing co-conspirators, the numbers show that only a handful of minor figures have been charged. Names like Trump's linger in ambiguity because the department has prioritized redaction over disclosure. Evidence from FBI investigators describes Jeffrey Epstein transporting a victim to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Donald Trump, where Epstein reportedly told Trump that the victim was a good one. Bondi's DOJ has scrubbed information from its website and continues to block the full release of these records even as survivors sit in the gallery demanding the truth. Let's play this clip.
Fact number one, Donald Trump is one of the most named people in the Epstein files. At least 5,000 files contains more than 38,000 references to Trump, his wife, or Mar-a-Lago. Fact number two, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell made young girls available to Trump on multiple occasions. For example, according to this file, Ghislaine Maxwell presented a young girl to President Trump who spent more than 20 minutes apparently flirting with her.
In addition to the suppression of the Epstein files, the evidence shows the DOJ is being used to protect the commercial interests of Elon Musk and Tesla. Attorney General Bondi has publicly called for Representative Jasmine Crockett to apologize to Tesla shareholders for her criticism of Musk. Bondi has characterized Crockett's comments as driving insurrection and violence. However, Crockett's actual statements, which were part of the Tesla takedown movement, were explicitly described by her as figurative and nonviolent. Despite this, the Trump administration has vowed to treat protests and arson attacks against Tesla as domestic terrorism. The DOJ has launched a terrorism task force to investigate these incidents. While arson is a crime, the move to classify attacks on a private corporation's property as domestic terrorism while simultaneously ignoring the thousands of references to the president in files related to child sex trafficking proves a selective and weaponized application of federal law. This is an analysis of power and control. The Department of Justice is being utilized as a protection racket for the executive branch and its billionaire partners by labeling critics like Jasmine Crockett as promoters of insurrection. Pam Bondi is attempting to criminalize political dissent. This control extends to the protection of Elon Musk, who oversees the Department of Government Efficiency. The power of the DOJ is being leveraged to ensure that Musk's business interests are shielded by the full weight of federal counterterrorism resources. This is a clear signal to the public. The government will use its most severe tools to protect its allies while obstructing investigations into its own leaders. The control over the Epstein files serves a similar purpose. By maintaining redactions and instructing officials to minimize the president's name, the DOJ is exercising control over the historical and legal record of the president's associations. This is not about protecting an ongoing investigation. It is about protecting a political future. The power to redact is the power to hide. When the nation's top law enforcement officer is the president's former personal lawyer, the redaction of the president's name from criminal files is a conflict of interest that borders on institutional corruption. The control of information is the ultimate form of power in a democracy. And the Bondi DOJ is using that power to ensure that the facts regarding Jeffrey Epstein's connections to the highest levels of government remain in the shadows. The strongest defense argument offered by Pam Bondi and her supporters is that the department is simply focused on real crimes and protecting the public from industrial-scale fraud. During her testimony, Bondi and Representative Tiffany highlighted a new National Fraud Enforcement Division. They pointed to fraud in Minnesota and California as examples of the department's core mission. Bondi argued that recovering stolen taxpayer dollars is a priority that transcends partisan lines. She also argued that her pursuit of those targeting Tesla is a necessary response to arson attacks and violent threats that threaten the safety of the country. She insists that there is no proof of criminality regarding the president in the Epstein files and that the accusations against her are baseless smears. This defense is dismantled by the law and the department's own selective actions. The law does not allow an attorney general to ignore 38,000 references in a sex trafficking investigation because they are busy with fraud cases in Minnesota. A Department of Justice can and must do both. The claim that there is no proof of criminality is a circular argument when the department itself is the one withholding the evidence that would prove or disprove that criminality. Furthermore, the defense of the Tesla task force falls apart when compared to the department's treatment of the January 6th insurrectionists. While Bondi calls for Crockett to apologize for insurrectionist rhetoric, the administration she serves has issued sweeping pardons for those who actually attacked the United States Capitol. You cannot claim to be against insurrection while pardoning those who committed it. And you cannot claim to be ending weaponization while you are actively arresting journalists who report on your failures. The focus on industrial-scale fraud is a calculated distraction from the industrial-scale obstruction occurring within the Epstein investigation. To understand the gravity of these actions, we must look at the legal principles involved. Under the United States Constitution, specifically the Eminence Clause, the president is prohibited from receiving any payment from the government other than his salary. Representative Crockett pointed out that the Bondi DOJ is prepared to give the president a $230 million payday, which she identified as unconstitutional. This is a fundamental legal boundary intended to prevent the president from enriching himself through his office. When the Department of Justice facilitates such a payment, it is violating the core law of the land. Furthermore, the role of a witness in a congressional hearing is defined by law. A witness is required to be responsive to questions. Pam Bondi's performance in the House Judiciary Committee was characterized by what lawyers call non-responsive testimony. Instead of answering questions about the Epstein files or the arrest of journalists, she asked questions of the committee members or pivoted to unrelated topics. In a courtroom, a judge would compel a witness to answer or face consequences. In a congressional hearing, a non-responsive witness is obstructing the oversight process that is essential to our system of checks and balances. The law requires transparency from the executive branch, but the Bondi DOJ is using legal technicalities and redactions to provide a facade of cooperation while practicing total obstruction. The professional judgment on Pam Bondi is that she is unfit to serve as the Attorney General of the United States. The role of the Attorney General is to be the lawyer for the American people, not the personal lawyer for the president. Bondi's record shows a staunch loyalty to Donald Trump that is incompatible with the independence required of the nation's top law enforcement officer. Her history as Florida's Attorney General includes policies that disenfranchise millions of voters, particularly black voters and voters of color. She has a record of attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Her actions in Florida and her current behavior at the DOJ show a consistent pattern of prioritizing the powerful over the powerless. An attorney general who uses her office to threaten a sitting member of Congress over criticism of a billionaire is not an officer of the law. She is an agent of an autocracy. She will be remembered as one of the worst attorneys general in history because she has prioritized fealty to the president over loyalty to the Constitution. This judgment is supported by the Legal Defense Fund, the nation's first civil rights law organization. Founded in 1940, the LDF has been at the forefront of the fight for equal rights and justice. The LDF released a comprehensive report detailing Pam Bondi's troubling record on civil rights and voting rights. LDF President Janae Nelson stated that Bondi has shown she is wholly unfit to fulfill the non-negotiable obligations of the Attorney General. The report highlights her efforts to undermine the integrity of the election system and her extreme fealty to Donald Trump. The LDF, a pillar of the legal community for over 80 years, has urged the Senate to reject her nomination because her record is rife with hostility toward the principles of equality and justice. This is not a partisan critique. It is a professional assessment by the most respected civil rights legal institution in the country. The failure of institutional accountability is evident in the Department of Justice's refusal to prosecute the enablers of Jeffrey Epstein. While the survivors of Epstein's crimes sit in the gallery, they see a DOJ that is more interested in protecting the names in the files than in providing justice for the victims. The institution has failed to explain why names like Trump's remain redacted while minor figures are prosecuted. The DOJ has also failed to hold its own agents accountable. There are investigations into rogue agents who have allegedly murdered American citizens. Yet, Representative Crockett revealed that the DOJ is attempting to obstruct these very investigations. The institution is protecting itself and its leaders instead of the public it is meant to serve. The seizure of voter data from Fulton County is another example of institutional failure, appearing as an attempt to interfere with the 2026 midterm elections rather than a legitimate law enforcement action. The procedural consequences of these actions are significant. The Senate is currently holding confirmation hearings for Pam Bondi. The evidence of her non-responsive testimony, her selective enforcement of the law, and her past record of voter disenfranchisement provides the Senate with the legal and moral grounds to reject her nomination. If she is confirmed, the procedural consequence will be a Department of Justice that continues to operate as a protection racket. We also face the unprecedented threat mentioned by Donald Trump regarding those who target Tesla. He has suggested sending such individuals to a notorious Salvadoran prison. This would be a potentially illegal move that bypasses the American legal system and violates the due process rights of citizens. The procedural future of our justice system depends on whether the courts and the Senate will enforce the boundaries of the law against an administration that appears determined to ignore them. The consequences of failure are the end of impartial justice and the beginning of a system where the law is whatever the president says it.